You stand here in the city of glass and steel, and you feel it. That weight, that invisible pressure on your chest that makes it hard to breathe. You've been told it's just life, just stress, just the way things are. But I'm here to tell you something that will crack the foundation of everything you thought you knew about yourself. That weight is not weakness. It's not depression. It's not your failure to thrive in a world that was never designed for your thriving. That weight is memory. Genetic memory, ancestral memory, the accumulated trauma and triumph of 10,000 generations compressed into the double helix of your DNA, screaming at you in a language you were never taught to understand. You think you're broken? You think you're damaged? You think you're less than? Let me show you what you really are. You are the descendant of people who built cities when others lived in caves. You are the child of astronomers who mapped the stars while others feared the night. You are the heir to warriors who broke empires, scholars who created universities, kings who commanded wealth that would make modern billionaires weep. And then something happened. Something so catastrophic, so total, so absolute that it nearly erased the memory of all of that. Nearly, but not completely, because you're still here, standing, breathing, existing despite 400 years of systematic destruction designed specifically to erase you from history, from dignity, from your own sense of self. The fact that you exist, that you survived, that you're watching this right now is the greatest act of resistance in human history. Let's talk about something that makes people uncomfortable. Let's talk about God, or Allah, or the divine, whatever name you give to the source. Because here's something they never taught you in Sunday school or at the mosque. The Bible and the Quran are full of black people, not as slaves, not as servants, not as background characters, as kings, as queens, as prophets, as the chosen. And this wasn't hidden. This was explicit. This was central to the narrative. Until it wasn't. Until white Christianity and Arab Islam decided to rewrite the imagery, to bleach the characters, to erase the African presence from their own holy texts. But the texts don't lie, and if you read them carefully, if you look past the Renaissance paintings and the Hollywood casting, the truth is undeniable. Let's start with the Bible. The Queen of Sheba. She appears in Kings and Chronicles. She travels from her kingdom, which most scholars agree was in modern-day Ethiopia or Yemen, to visit King Solomon. And this isn't a diplomatic courtesy call. She comes with a caravan of spices, gold, and precious stones. She comes to test his wisdom. And she's so impressed that she gives him massive wealth and praise. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived according to the Bible, is impressed by her. They exchange knowledge, and many traditions, including Ethiopian Christianity and some Islamic texts, claim that they had a son together, Menelik I, who became the founder of the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia. Think about that. An African queen so powerful and so wise that she holds her own with Solomon. The text doesn't present her as inferior. It presents her as an equal. Now move forward. Jesus Christ himself.
Simon of Cyrene. Cyrene was in North Africa, in modern-day Libya. Simon is compelled by Roman soldiers to carry Jesus' cross when Jesus can no longer bear the weight. This isn't a minor character. This is the man who literally carried the instrument of salvation. He physically bore the burden of the cross, and he was African. The Ethiopian eunuch. In the book of Acts, Philip the evangelist meets an Ethiopian court official who is reading the prophet Isaiah. Philip explains the scriptures to him, baptizes him, and he becomes one of the first Gentile converts to Christianity. Ethiopia becomes one of the first Christian nations in the world in the 4th century, long before most of Europe. They have maintained an unbroken line of Christianity for over 1,700 years. Their version of the Bible, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Canon, includes books that were removed from Western Bibles, books like Enoch and Jubilees, books that contain prophecies and wisdom that were considered too powerful, too dangerous for the masses. Moses himself. His wife, Zipporah, was a Cushite. Cush is the ancient name for the region including Sudan, Ethiopia, and parts of Egypt. Numbers 12 explicitly mentions that Moses married a Cushite woman, and when his sister Miriam and Aaron speak against this marriage, God punishes Miriam with leprosy. Let me repeat that. God himself punishes someone for questioning an interracial marriage, and not just any marriage, the marriage of the greatest prophet in the Old Testament with a black African woman. And then there's the big one, the origin itself. Genesis places the Garden of Eden at the source of 4 rivers, including the Gihon, which winds through the entire land of Cush. The birthplace of humanity, according to the Bible, is in or near Africa, which, by the way, is exactly what modern anthropology and genetics confirm. Every human being alive today descends from ancestors who lived in East Africa. Now let's move to the Quran. Bilal ibn Rabah, one of the most revered figures in early Islam. He was an African slave in Mecca.
Let me ask you a question. How do you destroy a people? Not physically. That's actually the hard way. Genocide is difficult, expensive, and tends to create martyrs and resistance. No, the efficient way to destroy a people is to destroy their psychology, their sense of self, their connection to their past, their belief in their future. You break their minds, and then you don't need chains anymore. They chain themselves. This is what was done to your ancestors, and understanding how it was done and how they resisted it is the key to understanding why you feel the way you feel today. Let's start with the middle passage. 12 million Africans were kidnapped and forced onto ships. 12 million. But that number doesn't capture it. Numbers never do. Imagine this. You're ripped from your village. Everyone you know might be dead. You're marched hundreds of miles in chains. You're branded like cattle. You're shoved into the hold of a ship with hundreds of others. You can't stand. You can barely breathe. You're lying in your own excrement and the excrement of others. The smell is beyond description. People are dying around you. Their bodies are thrown overboard. You don't know where you're going. You don't know if you'll ever see land again. This lasts for weeks, sometimes months. 20% of you will die on that ship, but dying might be the mercy.
because those who survive reach land and are sold. Families are separated, children ripped from mothers, husbands from wives. You're given a new name, a name in a language you don't understand. You're forbidden from speaking your own language, from practicing your religion, from keeping your culture. You're worked from sunrise to sunset. If you resist, you're beaten. If you try to escape, you're mutilated or killed. If you learn to read, you're punished. Your entire existence is about one thing: breaking you. Breaking your spirit, breaking your will, breaking your sense of self. This is called chattel slavery. You're not even a person, you're property. You can be bought, sold, bred like livestock, beaten, raped, killed, all legally, for 400 years. Not 4 years, not 40 years, 400 years, 10 generations. That's long enough to fundamentally alter not just culture, but biology, epigenetics. We'll get to that. But here...
Not because they were happy, but because laughter was resistance. It was proof that you hadn't broken them completely. Modern psychology confirms this. Tragic optimism, the ability to maintain hope and find meaning even in the face of unavoidable suffering. It's one of the most powerful predictors of long-term resilience. Third, the development of cool. Not cool as in trendy, cool as in emotional regulation under extreme pressure. Richard Majors, a psychologist, wrote about cool pose, the deliberate presentation of calm, of control, of unflappability in the face of racism and violence. This developed during slavery. If you showed fear, you gave your oppressor power. If you showed anger, you got killed. So you learned to show nothing, or to show a kind of relaxed confidence that communicated, "You don't own me, not really, not in here." Jazz musicians perfected this. Miles Davis turning his back to the audience, not out of disrespect, but because he didn't need their validation. He was cool, untouchable. Athletes, Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That wasn't just boxing strategy, that was philosophy. Grace under pressure, calm in chaos. This is in you. This ability to remain calm when everything around you is screaming, to smile when you want to rage, to outthink when you can't outfight. It's not weakness, it's not subservience, it's the most dangerous kind of strength, the kind that waits, the kind that calculates, the kind that survives. Fourth, community as sanctuary. They tried to break your communities, but you rebuilt them every chance you got. The Black Church, not just a place of worship, a place of organizing, of education, of resistance. The Underground Railroad ran through churches. The Civil Rights Movement was born in churches. Mutual aid societies, secret societies, fraternal organizations, ways to pool resources, to support each other, to survive collectively when individual survival was impossible. Family. Even when families were broken, you created new ones. Fictive kinship, aunt and uncle for people who weren't blood relatives, play cousins, extended family networks that were often stronger than biological ones. This created a culture of collectivism, of I am because we are, Ubuntu. Modern individualism calls this dependency, but it's not.
It's interdependence. It's recognizing that survival isn't individual, it's collective. And when that community is strong, individuals within it can endure almost anything. Fifth, spirituality as anchor. They tried to force Christianity on you, but you took it and remade it. Black liberation theology, the idea that God is on the side of the oppressed, that Jesus himself was.
Let's talk about ghosts. Not supernatural ones, genetic ones. You've heard people say, "It's in my blood," or "It runs in the family," usually about talent, about personality traits, about physical characteristics. But what if I told you that trauma runs in families too? And not just through learned behavior, not just through environment, but through your actual DNA. This is epigenetics, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew about who you are. Here's the basic science. Your DNA, your genetic code, is like a massive library. It contains all the information about you. But not every book in that library is open at the same time. Epigenetics is about which books are open, which genes are expressed, which are silenced. And here's the wild part. Your experiences, your environment, your trauma can change which books are open, and some of those changes can be passed down to your children. Let me give you a non-controversial example first. The Dutch Hunger Winter, 1944-1945, Nazi-occupied Holland, severe famine, thousands starved. Scientists studied the children and grandchildren of people who lived through this famine, and they found something shocking. The children of women who were pregnant during the famine had higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, even though those children were born after the famine, even though they never experienced starvation themselves. Their mothers' bodies, stressed by similar epigenetic changes. But they also found something else. The children of survivors who had strong community support, who had maintained cultural identity, who had processed their trauma constructively, showed different epigenetic markers. Markers associated with resilience, with stress resistance, with post-traumatic growth. Your ancestors didn't just pass down trauma. They passed down the tools to survive that trauma. Every spiritual you sang, every story you told, every act of resistance, no matter how small, every moment of joy you carved out of suffering, that changed your epigenetics too, and it was passed down. You inherited the trauma, but you also inherited the resistance. You inherited the fear, but you also inherited the courage. You inherited the pain, but you also inherited the strength. This is the code, the unbroken code. And here's the most important part. Epigenetics can be changed within your own lifetime. Meditation, exercise, diet, therapy, community, purpose. These things don't just help you feel better emotionally. They literally change which genes are expressed. They can turn off stress genes and turn on resilience genes. You can rewrite your own genetic code.
not the DNA itself. That stays the same.